Before Rome became the master of the world, before its legions carved an empire across 3 continents, the Mediterranean Sea belonged to someone else. Not a king, not a general, but a queen who rose from the storm-swept mountains of Illyria. Her name was Teuta. To the Romans, she was a pirate. To her people, she was a lioness. And for a short, brilliant time, she made the mighty Roman Republic afraid of the water. This is the story of the woman who dared to challenge an empire and whose legend echoes in the Adriatic wind to this day. Our story begins in Illyria, what we now know as the Balkan Peninsula. This wasn't a land of gentle fields and quiet towns. It was a rugged, wild country of jagged cliffs, fierce warriors, and shores battered by relentless storms. For the Illyrians, the sea wasn't just a border. It was a highway, a hunting ground, and a battlefield. They were a people born of the waves, and their lives were as turbulent as the waters they sailed. In the 3rd century BC, Illyria was ruled by King Agron, a formidable leader who had united several tribes and built a powerful navy. His fleets were feared throughout the Adriatic, but when King Agron died suddenly, the kingdom was left in a precarious position. His heir was just a boy. The regency fell to his young wife, Queen Teuta. The great powers of the ancient world, the burgeoning Roman Republic and the established Greek city-states, watched and waited. They expected Illyria to fracture. They expected a young widow, thrust into power, to be weak, to stumble, to kneel. They expected her to fade into obscurity. But Teuta had no intention of fading. Instead, she stepped onto the world stage, not with a plea for peace, but with a sword in her hand. She looked out at the sea that had defined her people and declared, in spirit if not in words, "The sea belongs to those who have the courage to command it." And command it she did. Teuta didn't just maintain her late husband's navy, she unleashed it. She sanctioned and encouraged piracy on a scale the Mediterranean had never seen. Illyrian ships, swift and deadly, became the terror of the seas. These weren't just random raiders. They were a state-sponsored force, an extension of the Queen's will. They swarmed Greek trading vessels, plundered Roman cargo ships, and stormed coastal towns, returning to Illyria with coffers overflowing with gold, goods, and prisoners. The Illyrian kingdom grew rich and powerful on the spoils of its raids. The world watched in stunned disbelief. A female regent was not only holding her kingdom together but turning it into a naval superpower. But as Illyria's wealth grew, so did Rome's fury. The Roman Republic was a rising power, obsessed with order, law, and, most importantly, the sanctity of its trade routes. Illyrian piracy was more than an economic nuisance. It was an intolerable act of defiance, an insult to Roman authority. They couldn't allow this pirate queen to disrupt their control. So Rome did what it always did when faced with a problem. It sent envoys. 2 brothers, Gaius and Lucius Coruncanius, were dispatched to Illyria to have a word with the queen. Their mission was simple: put this upstart barbarian in her place. They arrived at her court expecting to find a timid ruler they could easily intimidate. They were not prepared for the queen they met. Teuta received them not as a supplicant, but as a sovereign. The Roman envoys, brimming with arrogance, demanded that she put an immediate stop to all Illyrian raids. They lectured her on Roman law and international custom. Teuta listened, a faint smile playing on her lips. When they finished, her reply was calm, cold, and utterly defiant. She explained that according to Illyrian custom, piracy was a lawful trade, and she, as queen, had no right to interfere with the private enterprises of her subjects. In essence, she told the most powerful republic in the world that its laws did not apply here. "It is our custom," she reportedly said, "that every nation may live by the sea as it pleases." The envoys were aghast. One of them, Lucius, lost his temper. He sneered at the queen, insulting her and her kingdom's customs, and arrogantly promised that Rome would soon force her to adopt better manners. Teuta's expression turned to ice. She let the envoys leave her court. But as they made their way back to their ship, one of them would not complete the journey. Lucius was assassinated on his way home. Whether it was by Teuta's direct order or by her loyal followers acting on her perceived wishes, the message was unmistakable. This was not just an attack on an envoy. It was a slap in the face to the Roman Senate and people. It was a declaration of war, not just on Rome's ships, but on Rome's pride. No one had ever shown such contempt for Roman authority. The line had been crossed. The Senate in Rome was apoplectic. There would be no more negotiations. Teuta's act of defiance had sealed her fate. Rome was coming for her. The First Illyrian War had begun. Rome assembled a massive fleet of 200 warships and a full consular army. Their goal was not just to stop piracy, it was to crush the source, to break the pirate queen. As the Roman war machine rumbled across the Adriatic, Teuta didn't hide behind her fortress walls. She met them on the open water, her element. Her Illyrian ships, the swift Lembi, were perfectly designed for the coastal warfare of the region. They were faster and more agile than the heavier Roman galleys. They struck from the cover of fog and the darkness of night, appearing like ghosts out of the mist. They were merciless and efficient, masters of hit-and-run tactics. Roman supply lines were savaged. Isolated warships were surrounded and overwhelmed. Illyrian moonlight glinted on Roman galleys burning to the waterline. All along the coast, fishermen and sailors whispered tales of Roman soldiers being dragged from their decks, screaming into the dark waves. For the first time in its relentless expansion, Rome faltered. Its legions were masters on land, but at sea, against this queen and her pirate fleets, they were bleeding. A woman, a so-called barbarian, had made the empire flinch. She had proven that Rome was not invincible. But empires do not forget, and they do not forgive. Humiliation only fuels their hunger for vengeance. Rome regrouped. It learned from its mistakes. And when it returned, it came not as an army, but as a force of nature, a relentless storm that would never end. The Romans brought overwhelming force, but they also brought something more insidious: betrayal. They found a disgruntled Illyrian governor, Demetrius of Pharos, and turned him. He gave them the keys to the kingdom, betraying key strongholds and revealing Teuta's strategies. Even faced with betrayal and impossible odds, Teuta fought on. She rallied her warriors, commanded her remaining fleets, and defended her strongholds with ferocious tenacity. She refused every opportunity to surrender. She was a lioness defending her den to the last. But Rome was not a kingdom you could defeat in a single battle. Rome was an idea, a relentless, grinding hunger for conquest. One by one, Teuta's cities fell. Her naval power, the source of her strength, was shattered against the rock of Roman might. She was pushed back, further and further, until she was finally cornered in her last mountain stronghold of Rhizon. With Roman steel at her throat and her kingdom in ruins, she was finally forced to accept a treaty. It was a humiliation. She had to give up the majority of her kingdom. She had to pay a massive annual tribute to Rome. Her fleets were dismantled, with a strict limit on how many ships she could sail, and they were forbidden from venturing south of her own coastline. Rome allowed her to keep her title and rule over a tiny, caged territory. A crown, but no kingdom. Power, but no freedom. But here is the most important part of her story. In all the chronicles, Roman and Greek, through all the defeat and humiliation, there is one thing Teuta never did. She never knelt. She never begged. She never broke. History, as they say, is written by the victors. The Romans who wrote the histories painted Teuta as a mad, hysterical barbarian, a reckless pirate who foolishly poked the bear. They diminished her, insulted her, and tried to erase the memory of the fear she had inspired. But along the shores of the Adriatic, Illyrian mothers told their daughters a different story. They spoke of a queen who, with nothing but courage and the sea at her back, stood against the greatest empire the world had ever known. A queen who refused to be intimidated, who fought for her people's way of life, and who chose defiance over submission, even in defeat. She may not have won the war, but she won a place in legend. She proved that even the smallest kingdom could make the mightiest empire tremble. Today, when the wind blows through the mountains and across the bays of the Dalmatian coast, some say you can still hear her name whispered on the breeze. Teuta, the pirate queen, the woman who made Rome fear the sea. Empires rise and fall, victors write their histories, but the stories of true defiance, of unbreakable spirit, live on forever. If Queen Teuta's story lit a fire in your heart, then follow our channel. We're dedicated to uncovering the forgotten heroes and heroines who dared to shake the world. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales of legends that time forgot.